The leather folder lay in front of me like an overstuffed wallet, holding secrets and legacies. Inside was the incredible surprise, a $50 million hotel, a birthday gift from my grandma that came wrapped in a big bow of responsibility. Just as I was digesting this windfall, the front door swung open, and in strutted my mother with her shiny new husband. She beamed at me, as if we were one big, happy team. But here's the kicker, I owned the hotel, not them. When I fired back, absolutely not. I'm the owner now. My mother's smile vanished quicker than a magician's rabbit. Then pack your bags and leave this house, she shot back, her words as sharp as a cheddar cheese knife. But why argue? I stayed rooted, knowing my grandma had a master plan brewing. Tonight wasn't about their theatrics, it was all about grandma's next move, which would send their little act crashing down like a house of cards. People gaze at me now and see opulence, the marble floors and glass lobby of the hotel. They admire my name written in gold above the entrance, but they have no clue about the cacophony that used to echo through our family home. My grandmother, Sharon Bennett, kicked off her empire from a roadside motel in Vermont. At 21, she was a young dreamer, branded as foolish by others. Yet, her determination turned those mockeries into bricks of success. By the time I entered this world, the Bennett name was synonymous with ambition and envy. Unlike Grandma, my mom, Brenda, inherited only her pride. She's a spotlight lover, more interested in appearances than legacy. For her, success was about having her name on glossy magazine covers, not laying down blueprints. Enter my dad, Mark, the calm in our storm. He was all about solid operations while Brenda chased down fame. I watched them back when I was 16, and it was hard the day he left, suitcase in hand, tired of a love that had turned theatrical. That silence hung in our house, oppressive and all-consuming. After his exit, Brenda wasted no time remarrying Scott Miller, a guy who had a mouthful of buzzwords but zero warmth. He strutted around talking about synergy like it was on the tip of his tongue. I knew all too well why she sent me to stay with Grandma. It was less about stability and more about creating distance. With Grandma, life was soothing, the air rich with cedar and coffee, each morning punctuated by the rhythm of typewriter keys. She treated me not just like a granddaughter but as a budding architect, teaching me that true legacy requires guts, discipline, and the willingness to rise from the ashes. As the years rolled by, my mother's phone calls became shorter, each word sharper than a tack. You should visit, she'd insist, tagging on some business proposal about the European market. Meanwhile, I was swamped with schoolwork, dodging that awkward mother-daughter small talk. What had once been familial warmth turned into a cold connection defined by blood and legal ties. That is, until my 21st birthday arrived, the day Grandma presented the infamous leather folder, waiting like an unexpected pop quiz. Sit at my desk, she instructed, her voice serious yet kind. The folder felt heavy and strange, like it contained the weight of expectations I wasn't ready for. This is your inheritance, but it's also your test, she said, and those words stirred a whirlwind of confusion in my mind. What could this mean? I wasn't just inheriting a hotel, I felt like I was being thrust into a role that would challenge everything I thought I knew. The real question loomed large. Was I ready to embrace my legacy? Dinner that night was a blissful scene of roasted lamb under flickering candlelight, with Grandma exuding a rare sense of peace as she smiled at the perfectly set long oak table. For once, the chaos of the world seemed to quiet down, every clink of silver against china echoing my thoughts of stability and comfort. I was sipping the last of my drink when suddenly, the doorbell chimed, a tiny sound that turned my world upside down. I popped up from my seat, napkin still clutched in my hand. As I swung the door open, a cold gust blasted my face, but it was immediately overwhelmed by the invasive scent of my mother's perfume. There she was, Brenda, draped in a creamy coat, hair styled like a 1950s movie star, her smile having all the sincerity of a discount coupon. Next to her stood Scott, her husband, Mr. Consultant himself, who radiated fake confidence like cheap cologne, ready to unload trouble on my birthday. "Lucy, happy birthday, sweetheart," my mom chirped, her voice artificially cheery. It was like a sugar rush that masked something darker. Grandma's chair scraped against the floor behind me, a silent warning about who had just barged into our evening. Before I could invite them in, Scott waltzed in with a gift bag, bold as brass, making me suspect they already had their eyes on my inheritance. A new episode of family drama had just arrived at my doorstep. "Oh, we heard about your big gift," my mother's sugary voice sliced through, laced with menace. The mention of my inheritance, a staggering $50 million, came with the casualness of discussing the weather. I tried to keep it cool, insisting it was about more than just money. Grandma wanted me to continue what she started. Mom giggled lightly but dismissed me, waving a perfectly manicured hand, a gesture that reeked of knowing exactly what she was after. Scott leaned forward, his hands resting possessively on a chair, his charm trying to outshine the tension. "It's too much for one person, Lucy. Let us help." A proposal floated across the room like a chilling breeze, prompting Grandma's icy rebuttal, "A proposal for something that isn't yours." An awkward silence fell like an anvil, making Scott's smug grin slip, while Mom shot daggers at Grandma with a look I recognized from her marital quarrels with Dad. "Mother, please. Let's be practical," my mom insisted, though the word practical had a rotten taste after past mistakes echoed in the air. Grandma's response was slow and deliberate. "Practical? Like when you mortgaged the Burlington property without a word." The air thickened with old wounds as Grandma recalled each year the mistakes cost her. I stood frozen, the tension tasting of rosemary and rage while the familial facade cracked like old paint. "Lucy, don't let her turn you against me. We're family." Mom's voice quivered, but I could see behind her thin veil of innocence to a truth lurking beneath. This wasn't about healing, it was about regaining the power she lost. As Grandma rose, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder, she declared, "Dinner's over. Some things aren't up for discussion." That was her way of setting boundaries, and I felt a flicker of hope even as Scott's forced smile faded. Once the door swung shut, the insidious murmur of Mom's parting words washed over me like a cold wave. "This isn't over." They had left, but I felt the pulsing storm of conflict brewing just beneath the surface. The next morning, my home transformed. The light spilling through the windows felt different, brittle, as if the very walls were bracing for an impending confrontation. The quiet unease warned me there was no escaping what was to come. Grandma had locked herself away in her study, her typewriter dancing to its own beat. It was almost hypnotic, the clack-clack of keys punctuating the silence. When I ventured downstairs, the breakfast table featured my mom deep-diving into Grandma's ancient ledgers while Scott prowled by the window on the phone. These two were in cahoots, sounding like corporate spies disguised as family. I felt like the unsuspecting sidekick walking into a plot twist. "Morning, sweetheart," Mom flashed a smile that could cut steel. "We're just brainstorming a few things." I stifled a snicker. Brainstorming? More like plotting a coup. When I quipped about the business's stability, she brushed it off like a pesky fly. "You're young, Lucy, you've got college to worry about, not payrolls." "Oh, great." My day would be filled with them treating me like some clueless teenager. Scott's slick agreement felt like oil on a slippery slope. Ignoring my rising frustration, I poured a glass of juice and fought the urge to roll my eyes. I had a million questions buzzing in my mind, but I chose my words carefully. "Does Grandma know you're here?" Mom's face turned tighter than a drum. "She's resting." A perfect cover for the sneaky backdoor dealings, I thought wryly. I exited the room, feeling their gazes on me like a spotlight during my moment of truth. Later, Grandma's weary face greeted me as I entered her office, no shock evident in her eyes when I spilled the beans about my mom and Scott. "I hoped they'd at least wait a week," she sighed, sounding exhausted yet composed. This sounded heavier than any family drama I had ever expected. My stomach turned as I asked if she wanted me to call her lawyer. "Already did," she replied, revealing the hidden files that could rock our little world. Things you don't know about your mother and Scott, she said as she unveiled a folder full of secrets, financial documents, and under-the-table deals. Gulp. Why keep me in the dark? Sometimes, to teach someone to defend what's theirs, they need to see how easily it can slip away, Grandma explained, her eyes fierce yet kind. This was going to be a crash course in familial warfare, and I'd be learning on the front lines. We spent that afternoon in stealth mode, Grandma on the phone with her attorney while I sifted through papers, uncovering discrepancies. There were ghost accounts waving back at us like a bad horror movie. The atmosphere turned thick like the aroma of the pot roast simmering in the oven. As night crept in, Grandma calmly declared, "Tomorrow, we'll invite them back for dinner. Let them think they've won," and I felt a shiver of excitement. Game on. The invitation was pure Grandma, polite but laced with steel. I watched in awe as she typed the bait with precision, the air buzzed with an electric tension. Discuss the transition properly, I marveled. By 6 p.m., the table sparkled, the candles patiently flickering as if they knew the magnitude of the battle about to unfold. Grandma slipped into her navy dress, exuding an aura that said, "I'm ready for negotiation." At precisely 7, the driveway headlights sliced through the twilight like an omen. Mom strutted in, all confidence in her red dress, a statement scream for control if I ever saw one. I couldn't help but chuckle internally. This was turning into a showdown, and every stitch of this evening's ensemble was a plot point in a play we were about to perform with unintended hilarity. The stage was set, and under Grandma's watchful eye, we were ready to rewrite the script of our lives. Scott trailed behind with a grin plastered on his face, as Mom floated around the table, air-kissing Grandma with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Lucy," she chirped, all sweetness. But there was an undertone to her voice, sharp as glass cloaked in velvet. "I'm thrilled we're handling this properly," Mom declared, while Scott chimed in with the wisdom of a seasoned politician. "Family decisions deserve transparency. If I hadn't known better, I might have chuckled at their theatrics." Dinner kicked off with a polite silence, the clattering of plates reminiscent of a synchronized swimming routine with our forks. I could practically sense the building tension, Mom's fingers drumming impatiently against the table like a wannabe rock star. Meanwhile, Scott's gaze kept darting toward a silver folder resting near my hand, like a cat eyeing its prey. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken words until Mom finally surrendered to her desire for honesty. Spoiler alert, it wasn't pretty. "Let's be real," Mom announced, setting her fork down like it was a diplomatic bomb waiting to detonate. "Managing a business of this scale is complex. Expecting a 21-year-old to handle it solo? Absurd." Grandma was all wine sips and silence, her unreadable eyes glimmering like tiny daggers. Scott leaned forward, always the eager beaver, pitching their plan like it was a blockbuster deal. "I'll handle finances, Brenda's on PR, and Lucy will just learn from us." Each word dripped with the weight of command, not suggestion. I wasn't about to let this slide. "You mean I'd sign it over to you two glorified babysitters?" I retorted, incredulous. Scott's grin faltered for a split second, while Grandma's gaze sharpened. "And how does this benefit Lucy?" she queried coolly. Mom's smile stretched unnaturally. "Oh, it benefits everyone. We're family, after all." That word hung heavy in the air, providing a flavor I found mildly nauseating. "Sure, family," I said slowly, "but maybe we need to stop pretending this is all about love." Mom was clearly unprepared for my curveball. I pushed the folder to the center with an air of authority, declaring, "You wanted transparency? Grab a chair, let's get to it." Scott shot forward, but Grandma was quicker, opening the folder and tracing the first page as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Here are bank statements from the Burlington account, withdrawals made under Brenda Bennett's signature," she revealed. Mom's complexion paled, her earlier bravado evaporating. Grandma's voice rang like a bell, unfazed by the gravity of the situation. "These emails are proposals for non-existent overseas expansion projects, signed by you both," she continued. Scott's jaw popped like a stressed rubber band. You had no right, he snapped. Oh, I had every right, Grandma countered firmly. The tension thickened, creeping like smoke as Mom's desperate eyes darted in my direction, pleading for some sort of innocent intervention that I wasn't about to give. With a deft move, Grandma slid the last document across the table. Ownership amendment, effective immediately. All control transfers solely to Lucy Bennett. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum, and Mom glared at that paper as if it would spontaneously combust. You can't do this, she hissed. But Grandma, ever the unruffled matriarch, replied, I already have. The room exploded, Mom erupting from her chair, emotions spiraling like a dramatic soap opera. This is my legacy. You can't just hand it over. Scott, attempting damage control, grabbed Mom, murmurings of let's just go tumbling from his lips. But she was a volcano, refusing to calm. You think you've won, she roared at me. You're just a child in grown-up clothes. You'll drown in paperwork. I met her gaze, unwavering. At least it'll be my mess, I shot back, letting her rage wash over me. Her lip quivered, a wild cocktail of fury and humiliation painting her expression, and when she fired off a request to pack my bags, it echoed the same words she'd hurled days ago. And that's when Grandma burst out laughing, a glorious crescendo in the unfolding drama. The atmosphere crackled with an intensity that could make a sloth gulp coffee. Grandma's laugh, a soft chuckle, emerged, slicing through the tension sharper than Grandma's knitting needles. You're right, Brenda, someone's leaving tonight, but it's not Lucy. Time halted, and even the fire paused, seemingly engrossed in her statement. Then, with the flair of a magician, Grandma produced a court order from her purse, shocking our family dynamic like an unexpected thunderstorm. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, she announced with a knowing grin that could challenge a Cheshire cat. 2 officers sauntered in like uninvited guests at a dinner party. Scott, the clever con artist, turned as pale as a ghost seeing a vampire. Mom fumbled, her protests falling flat against the reality that Grandma had placed justice on speed dial. You wouldn't do this. I'm your daughter, she wheezed, eyes wild and desperate. But Grandma simply replied, you were until you sold the family name for glitter and glamour. As the officers escorted Scott away, the house felt lighter, a textbook case of cleaning house, nay, a cleansing breeze that filled the air. Grandma squeezed my trembling hands, her gaze steady, assuring me amid the whirlwind of chaos. I'm sorry you had to see that, she said gently. I shook my head, barely above a whisper, no, I needed to. Grandma's glistening eyes held strength, a reminder that the weight of tradition could also be the power of choice. Looking around at the remnants of our stormy dinner, a few leftover plates and napkins, I wondered, do you think she'll ever forgive us? Grandma sighed, eyes thoughtful. Forgiveness is for those who admit their actions. Your mother still thinks she's a victim. The soft pop of the fire accompanied my realization that this house, haunted by the echo of past arguments, now offered sanctuary rather than strife. I stepped toward the window, taking in the chaotic palette of police lights and my mother's mascara-drenched face, feeling not triumph, but an aching nostalgia for a family that could have been. Grandma joined me, her presence grounding. You did good, Lucy. You didn't raise your voice, you raised your worth. Her compliment lodged deep in my chest like a fortress of confidence. As the last police car vanished around the corner, the night sighed, releasing all of its pent-up tension. We didn't toast or celebrate our victory, we simply basked in the flickering glow of the fire, 2 women united against a legacy that had tried to bind us. The next morning felt surreal as tranquility wrapped around us, the same house that had been a battleground now hummed gently after the storm. Sunshine streamed through the curtains, with the fateful envelope still at the dining table like a final act in a dramatic play. Grandma sipped her coffee as if nothing had changed, her demeanor lighter. It was almost as if years of burdens had evaporated, spirits lifted by the sunlight that chased away shadows of deceit. News traveled swiftly like gossip at a family reunion. Scott vanished so quickly from the state, one could question if he ever existed at all. Meanwhile, My mother watched her reputation unravel, stripped of her false pride. Later, Dad Mark made an appearance, and though his words were simple, the touch on Grandma's shoulder spoke volumes. When he turned to me, his eyes sparkled with pride rather than pity, and for the first time, I felt the weight of a legacy lifting. Weeks later, life began to resemble something normal again. I finished my architecture course with a bang, and Grandma insisted we celebrate with a quiet rooftop dinner, just us, away from snooping eyes. To new foundations, she declared, and as city lights twinkled below, I realized that what we were truly building was peace. I no longer identified as a shadow of past family drama. I was finally the architect of my own future. My inheritance. Not a hotel or legacy, but the freedom to live life on my own terms, carving out boundaries to protect my newfound peace. If you've ever had to put your peace over family pride, you're not alone. Share your story, and let's celebrate together.